Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my usual broadcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, who's played 11 seasons in the NHL for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. Even though he won't admit it, he was actually on the power play with Wayne Gretzky in LA for a short period of time. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. We come to you twice a week to talk about the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we got a special guest today. He's been on our program before, Pete Weber, the broadcaster of the Nashville Predators. And I just discovered that Pete does not have a bobblehead made of him. And that is a failure on the Nashville Predators marketing crew. And I don't mind saying that. And I'm serious about that. Like, Pete is a very popular broadcaster in Nashville, and I'm sure people would love to have that. So I'm gonna use my connection to my good friend Jerry Helper, and
we should call David Poyle directly. Go right to David Poyle.
I might go right to David.
Do you want David's number? I'll give it to you here. Okay.
Yeah.
But guys, it's kind of funny, Kevin, because when I started in the NHL with Bob Miller with the Kings, I didn't know what to do with myself when he was talking and we were on camera in the 20 to 25 games. We would simulcast that. So I was called the LA Kings bobblehead because I kept doing this as Bob or Steamo was talking in response to what he was saying.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great story. Pete, I'm a little worried about my profession. Of course, is in deep trouble as well. We just have had so many cutbacks and people, but now it's starting to affect radio and television. We've seen. But, I'm also concerned about what's going to happen in the world of radio broadcasting. Yes. Do you foresee a time when teams are going to, as a cost-cutting move, go with the simulcast with television, as we've seen in some places?
Well, that happened to me in Buffalo. That's why I had to move along, because we got simulcasted out of the Sabres radio. I think that the first thing that's going to happen is most radio coverage of all sports is going to go to apps, to the internet. I mean, that's already happened in our league with San Jose, LA, and New Jersey. Right. Maybe there are more, but at least I'm aware of those. Now, that's not bad because you can still get them. I mean, these cell phones are ubiquitous, and we can get them on our computers and our laptops as well also. So maybe that's the way that's going to go, because I really think that the internet is the future for everything, writing and broadcasting, whether with video or with only audio.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, that would be sad to see go. Because I'm old school and I've been around forever, but I learned sports from listening to radio.
As did I.
Yeah, at night you got more stations. So
did those teams go to radio.com? Is that what happened?
Some are iHeartRadio.
Oh,
and then I think the Sharks essentially are doing it on their own team app. I don't think there's a station app involved with theirs.
Well, what I remember, now this is not a hockey story, but it's a baseball story, but I'm sure it applies to hockey in some places as well. But, when I was growing up, if you were riding your bike down our street at, say, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, because it was summertime, you could listen to the entire Tiger game as you were riding your bike, because all the dads would be sitting in their garages listening to Ernie Harwell broadcast the game. Right. So, you would it was like in stereo. You go down to the street and each garage would have the sound emanating out of the garage. And I'll never forget that,
Yeah.
And that's
same where I grew up in Illinois. I mean, it was, would, if it was the daytime, there would be a Cubs game coming out.
Right.
The nighttime, for the most part, it was White Sox or some Harry, Carey, Jack Buck Cardinals.
Yeah. And allowed people to putz around their garages and, take in the game. And, that was just the way it was. And, in the winter, it was a little colder, but you would still see some of that.
I was always listening to Lloyd Pettit doing the Blackhawks. I'll tell you
Lloyd Pettit, yeah. I got to know Lloyd mostly through when there was talk about Milwaukee coming in the NHL. But, he and his wife obviously had that team in Milwaukee and everything. But
how great was that for me, Kevin? When the Predators came in and the farm club was the Milwaukee Admirals. So at training camp, I got to sit like the puppy dog at the feet of Lloyd Pettit and listen to his old Blackhawk stories.
Yeah. He's an amazing guy. He was a fun guy, to be sure. So anyway, moving on here now that we've reminisced. Pete, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is Tom and I have a regular debate on. Tom looks at that Nashville team, and I shouldn't speak for him, but he'll correct me, and he will if I'm wrong. But he thinks there's some potential on that team that just isn't happening, and he can't quite figure it out. But I'm not so sure that this team is ever going to do it. It looks good in terms of some of the skilled players on the team, but we just haven't seen it step up and play since they reached the finals.
And I don't want to go overly into analytics here, but I'm going to say that so many of their attempts don't end up on net.
Yeah.
And I think that a correction of that, maybe not a total correction, but a correction of that would probably change the outlook of this team tremendously.
Yeah. Is their biggest problem just getting goals?
Yes.
Yeah, because, boy, they just seem to struggle to get goals.
And also, and I joked about this with John Hines on what we thought was a pregame interview on Monday, and it turned out to be no game. But do you just tell the guys now, as the game starts, okay, guys, consider this the third period? Because they've been strong in third periods, but not so much in 1 and 2.
Yeah. And, Pete, you've been around the game a long time, and you understand like how much culture means to a team. And I think I can speak for Kevin on this one. He'll correct me if I'm wrong, but we all think the world of David Poile and what he's done in the game as a person as well. So it may sound like a little bit of an indictment towards him, but to me, it's just the team looks like they're missing something. Like there's no culture there. It seems like, like to me, when you talk about it, the team not playing well in the first 2 periods, is that because they're not prepared? Is that a lack of professionalism? And again, I'm looking at it from a distance, so I'd like to hear what you think about that.
I think they've been prepared, but how do they respond to it? As a matter of fact, I've even heard conversation that there's a gap between say and do. We say we're going to do this, but do we do that until it's maybe, and in third periods, oftentimes too late. But you talk about the culture, and the one thing that stands out to me more than anything else after this handful of games have actually been played is that they have not had a lead going into a third period yet. And for a team like this, that to me is staggering, just absolutely staggering. So how do I lay that off? I don't know. How do I explain it? I just don't know.
I wrote a column recently, Pete, when I said that the Anaheim Ducks were wasting John Gibson in his prime years because they can't score any goals. But after I was done with that column, I was thinking, the Predators are kind of wasting Yossi as well. Yossi was last year considered the best defenseman in the game, still playing at a high level, can do it all. He's good defensively, good offensively, tries to help with the rush. In fact, probably he's trying to do too much.
Yes.
But he just doesn't have the team around him to, right now it doesn't seem to go far.
Well, and it's like this too, Kevin, Tom. When you get right down to it, maybe the team could use more goal scoring from Pecorine again, like that goal he scored last year against Chicago. Because the last, I'm going to say 10 days, his starts, I think he's played spectacularly well. And I don't think UC Saros has played horribly at all. But I think we've seen a lot of the old Pecorine when he's had his starts the last number of games. So the team still, it is the goal scoring, I think, that lets down those guys without question.
Yeah. So 2 guys for me, Pete, Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene, I think they're like fantastic players.
Yes.
But they're the guys I look at and I go, man, you got to give us more than what you're giving us, right? It just doesn't seem like you're getting all their game there.
Well, Ryan has been out for a while with injury, though. We understand he is very near coming back, maybe in this Thursday-Saturday series upcoming in Columbus. If not then, next week, Tuesday, Thursday against Detroit. And then Matt Duchene has been the enigma. It's almost like he's overthinking. When you can watch from upstairs and see a guy's on the ice thinking, you worry about it. And so he had a goal 2 games ago where he had no chance to think. The puck just ended up on a stick and he put it in the net. If he gets a couple more like that, I think that will loosen things up for him greatly. I really do.
Yeah, because he's shown he can do it.
Yes.
No question, he's got the skill, yeah.
Well, there was a comeback against Florida a few weeks ago. The team is down, I believe it was 5-3 with about 2.5 minutes to go. And Philip Forsberg and he scored 2 goals to tie it up. And then in overtime, Preds win it. So it's one of those things where it's almost like you have to play relaxed, but how do you get yourself relaxed?
Yeah. Easier said than done, yeah.
Pete, you and I both are a couple of former baseball guys who went straight. But the one thing that I always loved about baseball was the 3 and 4 game series. And you know what? Now we have those in hockey. And I wonder what your thoughts are as you see your team play at least 2 games with the team in each stand.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the St. Louis, Colorado extent yet of 7 straight games against each other. But I enjoy it. And I like the idea that familiarity does tend to breed a little bit of contempt. And I think Tom can speak to this. It's definitely one of those things where you get a little bit more edgy. And I think edgy hockey players produce a better product for the fans in the stands, or mostly in this case now, the viewing and listening audiences at home. And here's the other thing for a broadcaster, and this is selfish on my part, right? But the preparation from game 1 to game 2 is nowhere near as heavy as it would be ordinarily. Now, there will be, because of the taxi squads, more juggling on a roster going in as you normally would have. For example, the Red Wings here on Thursday didn't have their number 1 goaltender available, didn't have Valtteri Filppula available, didn't have Glenn Denning available, and then they all came back for the second game, and Detroit wins.
Interesting. So, Pete, the surprise team of the year for me right now is the Florida Panthers. You've seen them up close and personal. Are they that good, or is this just a little bit of a lucky streak they're on? I'm
going to tend to go with they're that good, and I think we've talked about culture. I think that Joel Quenneville's culture, the culture of the Hartford Whalers that he has helped perpetuate throughout the league has really come on right now. But I'm told that's what it is by Brett Peterson, my buddy here, Joel's teammate on the Whalers, and thinking about all the coaches that came out of there. Even thinking about Kevin Dineen working with the San Diego Gulls right now. All the coaches that came out of the mall, I think, have done a tremendous job.
It's like that out of the mall, yeah. That's right.
Out of the mall, yeah. Yeah, I used to love that. You stayed in that hotel and you could wander around before the game in the mall. And, they even had a movie house if you wanted to go.
Yes, I remember in a hotel bar there, when I was with the Kings, Ronnie Graham came in to see our general manager, George McGuire, who told him he was being dealt to Quebec. And you would have thought the look on Ronnie's face, because he didn't like to be in a bar to begin with, but he looked like he had just been given the death penalty. Going on there, but everything was a lot closer there. The Kings played the first game when the mall reopened after the merger. So we played our first game against Hartford in Springfield in the Civic Center, and then came back after the All-Star break. The great Gordie Howe returns to Detroit All-Star game, and we had stayed on the East Coast for that game. And while we are going to our broadcast location still in the lower bowl in the mall there, they were still painting the row numbers on the concrete steps as we're coming in.
Well, you know what else, and you'll remember this too, when you covered a game in Hartford, the paper trail was beyond belief. No team in the history of sports gave out more information on a game basis.
Good old Frank.
Yeah, that's right.
Frank Volnasic. Who he introduced, in many ways, guys, he might be the guy more responsible for analytical study of the game than anyone else. What he did with relative plus minus and all of that. And he was he not the first guy that really gave us definitive time on ice? I think that he was.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, he just had the level of statistics that he supplied you. Many trees died in the making of the Hartford Whalers, game, because you at the end of the game you'd have a stack of papers that was that thick, full of stuff he had given you just in the game. Yeah, like he just saw the game differently and gave you all kinds of information and tidbits and everything else.
I wish I had kept some of those, Kevin, because that'd be great to study now.
Yeah, always entertaining stuff. It's interesting how PR guys can influence the game. When I was covering college sports in the 1970s, there was a guy at Northern Illinois who used to write his press releases just in a colorful, crazy manner, and the writing was just fun and entertaining. And I actually asked him about it. He goes, "Oh, I grew up reading Mad Magazine." and that's how like everybody had a nickname. It wasn't just Matt Hicks. It was Magic Matt Hicks and his band of merrymen. Everything was just, and same thing with, if you remember, and again, Pete, you and I, well, Tom could talk about this too. He's our age as well, but how different the writing was in the early 60s. And, in basketball, you just didn't hit a basket, you scorched the twine. And, in hockey, it was the corded cottage when you get the puck on that, all kinds of stuff that not assists, but helpers, everything you do. You would never dream of doing that now. Now that would be considered cliche. But if you brought it back now, nobody's ever heard of it. So is it still a cliche?
Fresh.
Yeah, it'd be fresh material for this young group. So anyway, going back to the Predators, because I wanted to ask you to read the tea leaves a little bit and use your case study of your general manager who plays everything close to the vest.
Yes.
I remember talking to his late father who said he didn't even tell him what he was thinking or doing. So,
well, his dad used to go on road trips with us when we had the father's trip. Yeah. And I would get incredible interviews with Bud. And then David would right away. David go, "What did he tell you? What did he tell you?"
Yeah. But he never had insight. Bud told me that the biggest trade that David ever made, of course, was, well, I shouldn't say he's made a lot of big trades, but this was a big one when he got Rod Langway.
Yes.
And he had actually ridden in a cab back to the hotel with David. And he said to David, "You got anything going?" And David said, "No, not much." And then he said by the time he got back to the hotel, that was all over that the Poyle had traded for Rod Langway. And he goes, "Wow, so you didn't have anything going,
Yeah.
So,
what he did, David has told you the story of when he made that trade, and he decided he better call the team owner, Abe Poland. Have you heard this one?
No, I don't remember this.
I heard this.
Okay, so he calls Abe to tell him, because he was the only Capitals representative at the governor's meeting in Toronto. And he calls Abe, and Abe said, "You better be right. You just traded away my favorite player," meaning Ryan Walter, and hung up on it. And Abe hung up on it at that point. Well, he was right. It came through.
Yeah. Well, David's really, mostly been right in all his trades. He always make some that you like to have back. But saying all that, that's what I was about to ask you. It won't take long for this season to get away from teams, and
right.
With the Predators, and you're playing the same group of teams all the time. It's every game's a 4-point. Might we see some more of the usual boldness out of Poyle, or do you think he'll just ride the rapids with this group?
On radio here yesterday, he said, "We are getting very close to a crossroads where, paraphrasing quotation marks, where I might have to do something." And does that mean bringing up the youngsters like Francis Tomasino? Does it mean bringing up Rem Pitlick? They both had 2-goal games this last week for the Chicago Wolves. And just to try to change, word again, culture, just to try to change the culture and get guys who are hungry into the lineup here right now.
And they've got some cap space too, don't they?
Yes, they do.
So they could always, in a little while, they could do some trades if they want to. But Kevin and I talked. I mean, the guys you'd want to trade. I hate to pick on these two guys, but Johansson and Duchesne, if you decided to move those, to be tough guys to move with those contracts too, right?
Very difficult to move, I think, and I'm not so certain that David hasn't maybe had some at least half-hearted attempts trying to see if there's any interest out there. Because I would love to be the provider of his cell phone minutes. Because he's always on it. He is always on it.
Yeah. Well, Ron Weber is so popular that he's got interviews stacked up like planes over LaGuardia, and we can't time, and
I'm Ron's unrelated cousin.
Yeah.
He's called Pete Ron there, Kev.
I'm sorry.
Did you know Ron Weber?
Yeah,
very well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm sorry.
He calls every now and then, and it's still great. And he's another baseball hockey guy, and because I remember in the summers, he would do Minnesota Twins after his Capitals duties were over, and usually they were in that era. They didn't make the playoffs until David came there, so in that era, he had longer summers.
Well, Pete, it's always a pleasure to have you on. We appreciate your insight as always. We'll let you go. I know you got to jump on another one here, so thanks again for your time.
Gentlemen, thank you. And someday we have to get some good LA Kings stories out of Tom, because I think there is a book there in addition to the one Bob Miller did from Tales Behind the King's Bench.
Good deal. Good. Great to see you, Pete.
Thank you, guys.
That was Pete Weber, the Nashville Predators broadcaster. Always fun to have him on.
Yeah, he's great. I love him. Yeah, he's really good.
Yeah. He's got a lot of stories, a lot of baseball stories too. Pete,
right,
as I alluded to, was a baseball, broadcaster as well, and really enjoys the game still.
Definitely. Hey, I need to ask you a question. I've been thinking about this for a while. You're talking about analytics. How long ago did they start doing plus minus statistics?
Oh, well, it was there when I started in '86. So I would say, I don't know, 70s. I don't know. It's great.
Interesting.
I'm sure we could Google it. When did plus minus start? Or
okay, I'm on it.
Yeah, we're on it and see what's happened. A lot I want to talk about today. I just want to get your thoughts. The Maple Leafs all of a sudden, had trouble with the Ottawa Senators, and they split earlier in the year too with the series as well. And I've always found it fascinating that some good teams have had trouble with teams that maybe they should beat. And I think always there's, I don't know, sort of a collection of those kind of oddities. And I wonder, in your own experience, whether you remember of teams that just gave you trouble when they shouldn't have, and for whatever reason. And what are some of the reasons that some teams have trouble with other teams?
Well, I think when it's a team that's you perceive as being not as good as your team, it's the preparation, right? Like, I know, like, we're going to play the New York Islanders when they're in their heydays, winning their Stanley Cups. We were ready for every game. There's no question. If you weren't ready for that game, there's something wrong with you. But then, you go play some of the lesser teams. You need to think, okay, well, we're playing a lot of games. We're beat up a little bit. We can take the shortcuts out here tonight. We don't have to do all the little things right that we normally do. And I think that's what happens. I tell you, it even happens against individual players too. For me as a defensive defenseman, I knew I was going to play against Gretzky or Lemieux or whatever. Well, I was ready, right? Because I was wanting to stop those guys. I knew if it wasn't prepared, then I was going to look pretty bad. But then I would play against other guys, and I mean no disrespect to them at all, but I'll never forget when I was in LA, and Ronnie Stern, I think, was in either Vancouver or Calgary at the time. And again, I mean this total respect. Ronnie Stern wasn't a skill player. He was a gritty player, But he would walk around me all the time, beat me one-on-one, because and actually the coach, Rick Wilson at the time, said, like, top smarten up. I was just taking him too lightly. I was thinking, okay, I'll stop this guy anytime I want. Meanwhile, he walks around me. He's an NHL player. So it does happen to you. And you try to have it not happen, but because you're playing so many games, when you have a chance to think to yourself, well, and I don't think you really think it consciously, but maybe subconsciously, you say, well, maybe I can play a little bit easier tonight, right? And not do all the little things I need to do. That's when you get beat.
Yeah, that's a good point about it, guys being NHL players. I'd always note back when I started out in the business early in my career, I worked at the Port Huron Times-Herald, and the Sarnia Summer Pro League, which is right across the bridge from Port Huron and Sarnia, was always a great league. A lot of ex-NHL players, OHL players, college players would come home to Sarnia, or they're from the surrounding area, and they'd play in that. Or, got like Billy LeCain, who had been an IHL star, played in that league. And, the Verbeek boys played when they were very young. They were in that league as well. And the Hunters were from that area as well. So it was just a fantastic hockey. And Sean Burr was, as a Ontario Hockey League, Wayne Merrick. There were a lot of guys that came and played that league. And yet there were some just really good players from the area that played in it. But boy, you could sure tell the difference in an NHL player than everybody else. Like they
Right.
were completely different. And I don't care if the guy was a guy that was barely hanging on in the NHL. In that league, he stood out.
Yeah.
And it just an NHL player is an NHL player. I don't care where they fit in the grand scheme of their NHL team, but when they're out there in the population, you can tell.
All right, we've done our homework here on plus minus. So Montreal Canadiens were the first team to track plus minus in the 50s at some point.
Yeah.
And then in the 60s, all the other. I thought it was more of a league thing. I didn't realize one team started it. That's interesting.
Well, then the league started it, and I looked it up as well. 67. That's when they started putting in, which makes sense because I know they've gone back and sort of figured out plus minus for players, so they've had a handle on it.
Interesting.
Players. So
yeah,
but
it is funny, guys. Like I was in LA one year when Wayne was there, and it's like every time I stepped on ice, he was scoring. So I was like plus 30. So I loved the plus minus that year, but the other years when I wasn't so good, I didn't like it at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like any other stat. It depends on how you use it. But I think there is some use for it, especially in comparison to the other players. But even that could be misleading. You brought it up the other day. Seth Jones, the last time I looked, was minus 11. I don't know what he is right now. But, that's a reflection. Does that mean he's a terrible player? No. What it means is that the team probably has struggled. And because he's on the ice against the opponent's best players, and he's playing more than everyone else, he's going to pay a bigger price when the team isn't going as well.
Yeah.
So,
speaking of Columbus, did you see Laine got in a fight the other night there against somebody?
Yeah.
He was a pretty good. I assume that was his first fight. I don't know.
I don't think so.
No?
I mean,
okay.
Yeah, but I don't know that, but I would have thought he would have fought before. He's a big boy,
Yeah, so. That's true. He is big, and he did pretty well in the fight too. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's passionate. Like he's he gets into it. But I believe, at least it was reported to me by someone, that he said that he just didn't felt like he was into the game, wanted to get into the game. He was trying to, which is part of the reason why fights occur in the NHL is that. A fighter thinks that his team's not in the game and not engaged and not involved and, wants to get them involved.
Absolutely. So, yeah. There's some guys like the real good, the tough guys back in the days. Yeah. They knew part of it was knowing when to fight, right? If you're up on a team, and you're in the other team's building, you don't want to get into a fight, right? Because you run the risk of, getting the crowd all fired up and the other team fired up. But the same, if you're in your own rink, well, even in the other rink and you're down and the team's flat. But the big part of it too is, it's one thing for the fighter to go out there and get that fight going, to get the action going, but then the rest of the players have to follow suit. It doesn't do any good for the fighter to go out and do his job, and the rest of the guys going, well, I don't care, let him do his thing, and that's it. So that was the big part of the battle. We talked about leadership before with captains and everything, like an assistant captains. That's a big part of their role, is to feed off the energy and show the rest of the guys, okay, I'm feeding off the energy of the guy doing his job, right?
Yeah. No, well, like. Sports is always a little bit more complicated than the average fan wants to understand. It's a complex matrix with so many things that are into it. Like, I say this all the time. Like, you wouldn't think with a professional athlete that confidence should be a factor, but it's a big factor.
Totally. If you look at the New York Rangers right now, I mean, they lost again last night to New Jersey. And to me, confidence is a big part of that, right? Being willing to go out there and say, listen, I'm going to go out and work my rear end off. And if I make a mistake, I make a mistake, but they've got to get a better effort. Like, that's a good hockey team that's just not getting the most of themselves. Like, Kreider was quoted last night after the game when he was asked some questions, and, he addressed it. He said, we just don't have, I think, life or listless or whatever quote he used. And I've heard him say that a couple of times lately. And that's a bad sign where a team, of any age just isn't working hard enough. And to me, that's part of the problem that's going on with the Rangers right now.
Yeah, but don't we tend to say that when we don't want to, we're like, like the Sutters, when they coached, always would say things like, we just got to outwork them. Well, I don't care how hard you outwork the Edmonton Oilers in the 1980s. You weren't going to beat them. Like, they were just so talented. There's some games when you can't, where you're just outgunned. And I also think we tend to use the work of we're not working hard enough when things are going wrong. But there are some identifiable things with the Rangers.
No question.
That we did.
But, okay, well, here's a quote from one of our fans. He's a comment he makes here. But Quinn benches mistakes, so he's going against my theory that go make a mistake and don't worry about it. I don't think. Yes, if you continue to make the same mistake over and over, any coach is going to bench you. That's no question. Quinn is definitely like that. But if you make a mistake and you're working as hard as you can, you're bringing it to the game, and you just screw up, the coach is going to say something to you, but I don't think he's going to bench you for that. I mean, if it's a mistake, there's some mistakes that are made out of commission and some mistakes that are made out of omission, right? And if you're committing to trying to get something done and you screw up, most coaches are going to keep playing you. Yes, they're definitely going to say something, but if you're just not giving the best effort or you're being selfish out there and you make a mistake, that's a different story. I think I see that more. Like, to me, Quinn is pretty consistent with that with the Rangers.
Well, it's good to see Herb Brooks is still having an impact on you, omission and commission. Long after you.
I was pretty happy with myself when I came out of my mouth.
Good. I like that. But just going back to what I said about the Rangers, I mean, all that may be true because when you have confidence, when you're feeling good about yourself, and I'll use an example in a minute, you tend to work a little harder. Like, I remember Mike Ditka, of all people. I saw him quoted, and he said he always had the hardest practices after a big win because that's when you get the most out of the players. They're happy. They're excited. They want to get out there and get things done. So he'd always plan to get a lot accomplished after a big win. And if the team didn't perform well, he thought, well, we're not going to get as much done. So he would change his practice a little bit because the hearts wouldn't be in it. They were still going to be down. They needed time to kind of resolve that. But what I want to say about the Rangers is, last year, D'Angelo was having an incredible year, and he's not here. Yeah. Last year in Zibanejad, people were talking about that he was every bit the MVP candidate as Panarin. And for whatever reason, to me, it seems like COVID long haulers. But for whatever reason, he's not having the same kind of season. That affects Panarin as well. The goaltending hasn't been as incredible as it was last season. Like at the end of last year, everything was going right for the Rangers. And, we really liked that team. I remember you and I talking about that team, about how much, we thought in the playoffs they might make some noise. We thought they were going to get out of the first round. There was a lot going. So when you have just one or two or three things that, go wrong, it sort of drains everybody else. And then it's just hard. Now, if that is happening, I agree. If you work a little harder, you can mitigate some of that. But, you're still going to be missing D'Angelo's 50 points. You're still not going to have, the same offensive dominance without Zibanejad.
Well, I mean, you talk about goaltending in particular. To me, it's not a work ethic on the goaltending side. It is definitely a confidence thing. There's no question.
Sure.
Sure. Shesterkin, to me, last year when he came up and played, you could tell he was on his game. He was almost like every shot you think to yourself, the kid's going to stop it. You can tell he feels like he's going to stop it. Now there's something you can see. There's a little doubt in his mind, right? So,
Well, and look what happens with the team. Like, let's use the Vancouver Canucks. They're the team I wanted to bring up because it was the same thing for you and I last year. We loved watching the Canucks. And why do we love watching? Because they were a confident bunch. They expected to win. Things had gone well. They were a momentum team. They had everything going. And then everybody came to the rink. They were raring to go. They were fired up. Well, this year it's the exact opposite. And I think that's what's happening. Now they come to the rink and they go, well, what's going to happen now? And so many things have gone wrong. Like last year, and these are things that are really difficult, I think, to understand. Last year, they were 4th in the league in the power play. This year, they're 21st. Basically the same guys. I mean, they got Toffoli, but they got Toffoli late, last year. So it's essentially the same team. It's not exactly, but it's essentially, the same team. But the big thing is, Markstrom saved their bacon often last year. Yep. So it didn't, even if they played poorly, it seemed like they were playing okay because Markstrom would save them. Well, guess what? Markstrom is in Calgary. And who's playing more confidently this year? Calgary is the team playing with confidence because they got the guy back there, the 6'6" goalie, that's making the big saves. And how long has it been since Calgary had consistent goaltending? So they feel great about themselves.
Yeah.
And a lot of the mistakes that they make, they still think they're a defenseman short. But as long as Markstrom is making big saves, like 924, his save percentage is in a league right now where the average is 905. Well, that's a lot of saves.
I'll tell you, I lived it firsthand when we were out in Los Angeles, near the end of my career. We had a good hockey team before Wayne Gretzky got traded there. But as soon as Wayne Gretzky got traded there, I remember the feeling. You just felt like you were a better player. You were a better team, because now you're playing with arguably the best players ever played the game. So there's no, and it is funny. You're right. It doesn't matter how much money a guy's making, how old he is. Confidence is a tricky thing. It goes and comes quickly, right? And it's just sometimes there's no answer for it. You just lose your confidence. And and all you really can do is work to get out of it. And when I say it's easier to just work, it's easier for a guy like me when I play, because I wasn't a skilled guy. I didn't have to make something happen. I just had to work harder than everybody else, and I could get results, right? But a skilled guy, a goal scorer or whatever, just saying to him, work harder, you're right, just doesn't do it. If he doesn't have his confidence, he doesn't have his confidence. You can't just work hard and get your confidence back. Yeah,
and it's hard to tell, kind of what, it's a fire starter for whatever has occurred. But, I was watching some of the highlights or lowlights, depending if you're a Toronto fan, of that 4-goal Ottawa comeback. And it looked to me like the first goal on the comeback was started by what I would consider just a mediocre, maybe careless pass by John Tavares, where, of all people. And, I got not one negative thing to ever say about John Tavares. I just appreciated him as a player, as a human being, and everything else. But I'll bet he'd love to have that play back, because it ended up with a goal, and and they were on their way. So what if he doesn't make that pass? Does that comeback happen? I don't know.
But it kind of tells you about how fragile the team is too, right? So if a guy makes a mistake and they score, they still got a 3-goal lead, right? Is that whatever, 2-goal lead? So they're still fine. It's just now if they kind of fall apart from a mistake, then you got to get a little tougher than that mentally, right? Like those good teams that win, part of it is that mental toughness. When something goes against them, they turn it up even more instead of kind of getting inside, crawling into a shell. And again, some guys, you understand, especially with younger players, well, any players, but it's almost like, oh God, I don't want to be on the ice. I don't want to touch the puck, because I don't want to make the next mistake that's going to cost us a goal. So that's where, like, that whole culture, leadership, character of your team is so important. And and again, it's tough to grow. It just doesn't grow on trees for you.
Well, it's funny to me too about how, even as a fan, but I'm sure it's really true if you're a player like yourself or how you can feel when they really have a chance to come back, or whether it's just one of those unimportant goals. Like, you just sense it. Like all of a sudden someone gets a goal and then you go, uh-oh. Like, or you just dismiss it as, I was watching the game the other day and the Red Wings were up 4-0 or 4-1 and Chicago got a goal. And I didn't think, well, here comes the rally. Right. I thought, well, there's, a lax Red Wing team or a team that's still not there yet, giving up a sloppy goal. But boy, you can sense it when a team, if they get that goal, and all of a sudden it's almost depends on what the next shift looks like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And whether you're,
and that's where coaching really comes in too, right? Making sure you're putting people on the ice at the right time. Like that next shift, you're right, is really important, both for the team that scored and the team that got scored against. Right? The coaches can really make a big difference there too.
Yeah, for the people who aren't, as attuned to the game too, explain about how the length of shifts, Tom, has changed dramatically from where you were in the 1980s to where we are now today.
Well, you were supposed to stay on the ice for that 45-second, minute-long shift, but there's a lot of guys, like you take Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky stayed on as long as he wanted. I'll never forget, we were in Los Angeles and Jay Miller was on the team. Great guy, great teammate and everything. And Wayne had stayed on for what was 3 or 4 minute shifts late in the period. And the funny thing with Wayne was, if another player did that, you'd think he was being selfish, right? Come on, get off the ice. Next guy, get up. But Wayne was never selfish. Wayne just thought that he had something going on the ice that was going to help the team. He always was about team all the time. So he did it for the right reason. But we were playing bad in this game. I think it was after the first period. It was in the LA Forum. It was right at the end of the period. We come in the locker room. Everybody's mad. We got the veteran team, and everybody's, come on, guys, smarten up and all this stuff. And Jay says, and Wayne's in the room. He says, well, it would help if guys didn't stay out for those 3 or 4 minute shifts. Well, of course, he's talking about Wayne. So the room got silent, and Wayne rarely got mad and stuff like that, but he snapped for a second. He walked over to Jay Stahl, threw his gloves and stick down in front of Jay Stahl. He said, "Listen, if you think you can do any better, you use these." And the room was dead quiet. Wayne, you can see, sat down no more than 15 seconds. He composed himself, went over, grabbed his stuff. He says, "Come on, let's go." I started laughing about it. So it was clear that,
right.
That was one of the funniest things. So ice time and length of shifts, you do see, I think the guys, that's one thing about the game now. It's more, hey, you're staying on for 45 seconds. That's it. But it isn't just the time of your shift too. It's more, you don't want, if you're killing a penalty and you're in your zone and you shoot it down, and maybe you've only been on for 30 seconds, but if you now get caught on the ice and now you get tired again because now the puck comes down into your zone, you say to yourself or your coach, you need to get off the ice earlier, even if you're not tired yet, get off so you don't get tired while you're killing that penalty. So it depends on the situation too. And the guys now are pretty good with that. But I mean, their conditioning is so much better too, so they can stay out longer if they have to.
They can stay out longer, but they actually go shorter, which is really kind of ironic. But and that the idea being that when you're going shorter, though, you're just going full bore.
Right. Here's a good example. Our trusty assistant here, Susan Brooks, keeps track of these statistics. Draisaitl and McDavid had a 4-minute shift at the end of the game. See, there's a good example.
Well, I mean, the guys can do it. I mean, they're capable of doing it. There's no doubt about it. Well, in the old days, we're going back to the 1950s. Gordy would play 40 minutes a game, and then when he wanted to rest, he'd drop back on defense, and the defense would move up he'd rest by playing defense, which is really amazing. But I wanted to bring up before we go too, Mike Keenan. I always got along really well with Mike Keenan. We go way back. I went to his home after he had gotten fired by the Blackhawks, and did a long, lengthy interview with him. Spent the day with him, and I really got to know him. So throughout his tenure, I always, he always had time for me, and we could always walk him. One time he said to me, "Kevin, how many minutes in a game?" And I said, 60. He said, "Nope, 360. 6 players, 60 minutes each. So that's how I view a game. That I got 360 minutes." And I remember thinking at the time, well, when you were coaching at Canada Cup, did you say, "Wayne, how many minutes do you want to play?" And then, okay, you want 30? Okay, well, the rest of you have 330 to split up.
That's funny.
That's how you would do it. That's how you had to view it.
That's funny. I don't remember it, but I can't remember who told the story on one of our shows where Mike Keenan, when he was coaching the Rangers, and Kovalev stayed out for some long shift or something. So Keenan kept him on the ice and trying to teach him a lesson, right? But Kovalev thought that he was kind of being rewarded. So he loved it. He just stayed on the ice the whole time. He'd come to the bench and Keenan go, "No, get out there.
Great. Yeah. The thing about Kovalev too that a lot of people didn't know is he was a licensed, rated pilot.
Yes.
He could, fly not just Cessnas, but more advanced.
Great athlete too. Yeah. Apparently, he's a really intelligent guy. He's really.
Yeah. One of the best stick handlers that we've ever seen. Probably doesn't get enough credit for that. He had magic in those hands. I enjoyed watching him play. Well, I enjoy being on this broadcast as well, but we always go a little bit longer. They have been. So hope you've enjoyed the broadcast. And if you would tune in to my broadcast with Bob Duff on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4:00, hockeydebates.com. I'm also writing for hockeybuzz.com. I'll have a piece probably later today about my thoughts on what they should do to the draft. I don't think it's as bad as other people do. I think we just need to change the percentages, not.
Are they talking about the lottery, the draft lottery? Are people complaining about that?
Lottery, correct. Yeah, a lot of people think that we need to make changes, and I think there is a change that needs to be made, but I think it's just in the percentages, not in. I don't want to go back, even though some people do, to the days when only 5 teams could win the prize, and you can only move up 5 spots. I don't want to go there. I just want to. I think the teams that aren't in the playoffs should all have some kind of chance, even if it's minute. But the teams that are the worst should have a more significant chance of winning.
Again, you just don't want to get to the point you're rewarding teams tanking, right?
No, but you shouldn't have the kind of season that the Red Wings have and finish 4th. That's all I'm saying. And you should have a better chance. What struck me was when Steve Eisenman said at the end of after it happened, he was fourth, and he goes, I expected this because I told my staff there was a better chance that we were going to finish fourth than in the top 3 picks. Well, that's wrong. When you have the worst, you should have at least an even chance. It should be like 51%.
So, like I said before, you're going to reward them for being bad.
Yeah, well, that's what the whole. I hate to break this to you, Tom, but the whole reason we have the draft is that you don't want teams to be bad forever.
Right, but you don't want to give them a reward for being bad either.
Well, it is a reward, and that's the way it works out. But the idea would be that you've got to supply some help. And my argument for keeping the teams that just miss is, they've actually worked pretty hard. Like they tried to make the playoffs and they didn't. So they should have a little bit of a chance to get that guy. But, you don't want the bad old days when you could. I mean, that's why we have the salary cap to try to keep teams competitive. Well, a draft is another way to try to keep teams competitive. And we don't have the schedule, in the NFL, the way they do it, obviously, is strength of schedule. They adjust the schedules.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But we don't do that. So, we can continue to, do it this way, but I just think we just got to give them a better chance. Like it doesn't have to be, they shouldn't every year, the worst team get the best player, but it should be a better chance than they have now.
Yeah. All right. We're going to debate that. We should have another show on that one.
So
all right, guys. And again, you can listen to us on radio.co at 365 Sports. Again, that's radio.co at 365 Sports. Good job. We'll see you guys Wednesday. So we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Definitely. See you, Kev.